Well, another recent pickup of mine, Parthenon, Rise of the Aegean. This is a Euro-style game, it looks like. I haven't completely set it up. I'm going to look at the rules and remind myself of them in front of you again. And maybe you'll catch something along with them. I don't know if somebody else has done a rules coverage of this, but it helps me to do it on camera, I think. Alright, so the goal of the game is to build a certain number of buildings, basically. There's a possible time limit if you don't if you aren't able to get all your buildings out in time. That can also end the game, but the base goal is to get a certain amount of your buildings built. Let's take a look at how the actual game works. Each of the players is representing one of these islands here, sort of in the center of the Aegean, and they're mainly going to be playing using a little card display and cards that they've built and whatever in front of them. The map is mainly just really a placeholder. What you're going to keep there is these harbor status cards. And I'm not going to go into what they are because I don't know yet. But there's going to be one of them in each harbor. And they indicate whether or not you can go to that harbor. As we play, we'll see more about them. And maybe I'll discuss them a little bit more afterwards. But I want them to be a surprise for my first play. Even if that means I know less about the game, right? Okay, let's look at some of the... There's a lot of stuff covering the table here, and I have a real fear that this game is going to bloat well beyond the space that I've got reserved for it, essentially. I'll try to do the best I can there, but I wanted to keep this to a small table game because it looks so tiny, right? I mean, this is the board. But there are a lot of cards and they're all spread out. First of all, there's a bunch of commodities. And these basic commodities can be produced right in the villages of your island. These are more complicated and difficult, rarer commodities, which I think, but I'm not positive, although I can look, you can build with some of your workshops. Let me see, yeah, so for example, there's a spice workshop here. I think one of the players is, or two of the players are going to be able to build each of those rare commodities. And then there's gold, which is available, I think, only via trade, but I'm not sure. Again, I haven't looked at everything here in order to really get a feel for it because I don't really want to... I want to kind of experience the game as I go, okay? And then, what other things do we have here? We have plans for the wonders. You're going to be able to go to Athens, and not only can you trade there, but the first time you go there, you get a free set of plans for one of these great wonders. And these are cards that kind of explain what their effect is, and how they're kind of under partial construction and what you build. But you draw those at random when you go there. You can also pay for an additional one. You need to build two of them to kind of end the game. These are philosophy cards. When you build an academy, you're allowed to pick one of these philosophies up, and then you gain the abilities of it. Now, you only can pick one when you build an academy that someone else doesn't have, but it's going to be possible to get the others that other people have through later play. These are Aegis cards, which are going to provide you defenses, so military, armor, and warship, and then Gift of Poseidon, which allows you to kind of deal with naval hazards in an easier way. Speaking of which, there's going to be a deck of hazards, which will be somewhere up there, that we draw when people go sailing to visit some of the foreign lands. The harbor status cards are going to go here, and then there's a set of event cards for each year of the game, which somewhat portray the passage of time, and we'll, again, I'm not going to look at them, but we're going to see how they affect us as we go. All right, and they kind of go through all that. You also have, you start with one of your fleets, and you have the card for it. If you're going to get more fleets, you have to buy them. And the next one costs you gold. A little card for the sequence of play. Each player starts with a couple of villages, and these are different for each player. This is what they produce each turn, kind of for free. And then they have a whole deck, and these are also kind of different for each island, of advances, buildings, whatever that you can build. So for example, additional fleets, some special buildings that have effects, additional villages, and we'll see how that all works when we look at the rules. The rules themselves are in a particularly annoying format for me. Very, very wordy. Obviously, no cross-referencing via paragraph numbers or anything like that. A lot of pictures. I find this harder to pay attention to than a nice dry SPI set of rules. Got burned on this with California, which had the tiniest little rules, but relied on some piece of information that's over in a corner. This at least appears to have the information all in the textual version, but it's tough to remember what's going on when you don't remember the formatting peculiarities as your cue to, oh, I need to go to that section 6.14 and see, you know, and I know how that's shaped in the text. And that's about where it's going to be the rule that I'm looking for. I find it much harder to deal with these, that's all. Okay, so we've randomly assigned the islands. In less players, it's not completely random. There's basically 3 islands that have a torch on them up here that makes them the required islands. In a 3-player game, they're the only ones that play, and in any larger number, they're going to be involved. But the others get added to it. And I may actually end up giving this a try in 2 players, although that's going to be really, really weird. Okay, so let's look at what the actual mechanics of the game are going to be. And the game comes with, each player has a list of all the different cards in here, the trade exchanges, and then more information. Just tons of information on here. Like, the entire rules are kind of contained on here probably, but I find that useful when I'm sitting down to play a game, not so useful when I'm trying to learn it from the rule book, but it should be very helpful to everyone once they're actually in it. Okay, so the game has a number of different steps in it, and that's listed here. And the first thing is the event step. One player will be the Archon. At the beginning of the game, that's chosen completely at random. And they're going to get this little card. It'll be on a stand-up thing. I forgot to put it on one, just like the fleets are. And that player has certain advantages in terms of being able to make decisions that other players aren't going to have. And in the case of events, for example, what the Archon does is he flips over one of the year's event cards, reads it out, and then all of that year's event cards, one at a time, take effect. Which means if an event card is picked up on the first turn, it's going to affect you for, I think, 4 turns while you wait for the next year. The Archon gets to choose the order of those event cards, and also in some of the event cards, the Archon gets to make choices actually on the card. And we'll see how those go. There's some that they suggest removing on a first game. Of course, I'm not going to remove them because I'm not looking for a balanced game here, and I'm not looking for someone not getting hosed. I'm interested in seeing the flavor of it all. Then we go to the production phase, and this is done simultaneously. All the players do it at once. Each village and workshop produces what it says. Well, in this case, I'd be producing grapes and a timber, and I'd get one of each of those cards. Now, what's kind of cool is all these cards are the same back, so you kind of have a hidden hand of commodities. Kind of like Settlers of Catan, right? where you have this handful of stuff and nobody knows exactly what you have. Okay. So I get my production there, and there's an additional little aspect of that. If I have an army, I can send it, and I can send each army to one village. And in that case, the village produces 2 of its kind of stuff. And you'll see some of these other things also produce. Not those. I was looking for workshops here. Tool workshops would be producing tools. I can't send an army to a workshop, though. Okay. So now you have your handful of commodities, which could be the basics, the rares, and gold. And you put them in a pile next to your card. And now you're allowed to cut deals with the other players. You can cut whatever deal you like in terms of trading commodities. In fact, you can trade commodities and Aegis cards at any level you like. Nothing else can be traded, but it does mean that you can arrange to make a regular trading type arrangement. So, for example, if my island has timber and grapes, and this guy has ore and grain, well, we may want to stock armies on our islands and trade the 2 things we don't have for the 2 other things we don't have, or whatever. And these kind of agreements can be come to very easily. It's a safer means of getting commodities than going off shipping, but of course you have to cut a deal with your neighbors. Then we go to the journey phase. And at this point, you put commodity cards underneath your fleet. You can put up to 6 commodity and or Aegis cards underneath a given fleet. Then you place your fleets on the map beside the location you want to go to. So for example, you could go towards Carthage, and there's going to be a harbor status card here that you don't necessarily know about. You put your fleets there, and like any action that might require, where people might want to have information about other people, the Archon makes the decision who places first if it needs to be decided. A single player can send more than 1 fleet to a single land, but each fleet has to have at least 1 card underneath it, either a commodity or an Aegis. Okay. Now, then we hit the hazards phase over here, and at that point there's going to be hazards cards drawn for the fleets journeying to lands. If there's any fleets going to neighboring lands, Athens, Sparta, or Ionia, these are going to be the nearby areas. Athens, Sparta, Ionia. 1 card is drawn, and that card will affect all the fleets journeying to neighbor lands simultaneously. If it's a safe journey, everybody makes it there without a problem. Otherwise, the players owning those fleets have to take the effect listed. Now, in some cases, for example, storms, it only targets the fleet or fleets with the most cargo, which means that even when you launch your fleet, it may be important how much stuff you put on it, and that is part of the order decision in there. There's a general tip here that if you have a cargo of more than 3 cards, you have a greater chance of suffering from hazards than other fleets. And also, if you're carrying rare or gold commodity, there's a greater chance that you will suffer the hazard. Of course, these are the things you want to carry, but not necessarily do you want to sail them away. Those are the things maybe you want to be trading for rather than trading away. Hard to tell. Once we play, we'll see more of it. Okay, after the neighboring lands draw their card, then there's going to be 2 hazard cards drawn for the foreign lands, which is Egypt, Carthage, and Italy. Sort of further out, that require more seamanship. And those both take effect. If one of them's a no effect or no safe journey type card, it doesn't mean the whole journey is safe, it just means that part of it's safe. And then you still have to resolve the second card. Okay. It's possible, however, to use Aegis cards aboard your fleets to help you avoid hazards. And we don't know how this is going to happen, but they mention one here. A warship, for example, can avoid the effects of a pirate hazard. There's also the gift of Poseidon, which allows you to draw a new hazard card that only affects that fleet. Everybody else is affected by the one. But it's kind of weird how it's worded here, but everybody else is accounted for as to whether that fleet gets affected. So if it's a storm, which maybe only affects the fleet with the most commodities, and you don't have the most commodities, it's not going to hit anyone, because you've drawn that because you didn't like, you played the Poseidon gift because you didn't like the one event that was going to affect you. But this other one doesn't automatically bone you because you know, you're the only one drawing for it. Okay. It looks to me like each player using a gift of Poseidon will get their own draw. Okay, then you go to the fleet trade phase, and if you went to a foreign harbor and there's a harbor status card there, you flip it over and see what the effect of that is. Again, lots and lots of little lucky aspects here, right? And you may have to pay something, or you may simply not be able to get into the harbor, or maybe you needed certain Aegis cards. We'll see how those work out. Now, once you resolve the harbor status, then you're going to be looking at what's here. So each area has its own special bonuses. So for example, here in Carthage, I can spend 1 gold to buy a warship. In Italy, 1 gold to buy an army. In Egypt, I can buy papyrus, whatever that means. Normally, though, I'll be trading on these foreign trade charts as opposed to the neighboring lands charts. The neighboring land charts, I'd be trading 2 basic commodities for any 1 basic, or 4 basic for a gold, or 8 basic for a rare. Well, over here, it kind of goes the other way. Basics become more valuable. In fact, all trades become kind of easier. So I can trade a rare for a gold, whereas here it's 2 rare for a gold. And it's just more, and then here, golds get exchanged at a worse rate in the neighboring lands than they do in the foreign lands. So if you want to make good trades, you probably have to go to the foreign lands. But maybe you can get away with the safer trades. It's best if you can cut deals with other players, though. That's very obvious, because you don't have to take that risk. On the other hand, you have to clear the harbor status in order to get your plans for a wonder. Alright. You can make as many trades as you like, but when your ships go home, and they'll make it home automatically, they can only have 6 cards on them at the end of it. So you can't haul more home than you hauled there. Some of the harbor status cards will be a shortage or a surplus, in which case they change the value of particular commodities once you go there. And those harbor status cards are going to remain throughout the length of the year. Okay. Alright. Then we go to a build phase after you return, and your commodities return to your hand. Your fleet comes off the board and goes back onto the card that indicates that you have built that fleet, I guess. And then you're allowed to spend commodities in order to build structures. And that's listed here. So for example, if I want to build another structure, I can spend just 1 basic commodity, it doesn't matter what, or 2 basic to make these other villages, or 3 for the olive village. Is there a limit to the amount of stuff I can build? Players cannot build duplicates of their Acropolis structures unless listed on their island's alternate Acropolis structures. Well, let's see what that says. I don't know where the hell that is. Right. Maybe there's information on the cards. Not seeing anything. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where that... Oh, here, alternate fortress. An alternate great harbor. So these would be ones that I could build a duplicate of. If I already had a great harbor, I can probably build a second one. And I should look at through my cards and see, are those duplicates reflected here? And if not, what does it mean? Yeah, I got 2 fortresses because I'm allowed to build a second one there. And I got to be careful about that, because if I build that, that means I have to build it instead of another building. I have to cancel out another building, and I'm only allowed to build 1 alternate structure per game. So I'm allowed to pick one of these 2 to double up on. We're not sure what the value of doing so is at this point. It's hard to absorb all the information on these cards for me. It's not an easy way to express information to me. It's all pictorial, and I'm not good with that. Okay. So then, as you build structures, and you're allowed to build one alternate structure instead of one of your other structures, if you have some reason for doing that. You can also build Aegis cards using your structures to produce and also produce gold commodities from some of these structures. And this is all going to be defined on the particular structure. And maybe back here, I can't understand these pictures, so I will try to understand them, but you know, I like words. little images don't work with me. Okay. I'm not one of them visual people. Okay. And then each individual Acropolis structure can only create 1 card each season. So you can't use that structure to generate whatever resource or whatever value it produces twice in a row in one season. Certain ones have a specific effect. For example, a treasury allows an island to retain 6 face-down cards during the discard phase instead of 3. Whatever. I'm sure we'll get to that. Academies and Philosophies, although we're running low on time, and I was hoping to get through this, but it's a lot of words and not a lot of information in here, and all the information's over here. As soon as an island builds an academy, the island gets a philosophy card, and they get that on top of their philosophy. It's linked to that academy. No one else can grab that one by taking an academy, and it gives you a special ability. I don't know what the special abilities are like. We can look at some of them. Once per year, you may choose to ignore 1 harbor status card for the entire year. Okay, I don't know how you mark that, but whatever. Okay. Now, if you have an academy, you're allowed to buy another philosophy by paying 1 gold commodity to the bank for each philosophy card you already have. So if you like someone else's choice of philosophy, you can pick it up for pure cash, as long as you already have an academy. This is played to the bank. You get a copy, and you can now use the special ability. It doesn't require any permission, but there's only 4 copies of each. And once 4 islands have a philosophy, no one else can get it, and no one can buy their own philosophy or a second copy of a philosophy to try to prevent someone from getting it. You can also build fleets. Well, the first one costs 1 extra gold, and it's again listed on the cards and on these things Unfortunately, there's no information in the rules, so it's obviously not that important. You do it as you decide, as you look at your cards, right? Okay. And they say you should build your second fleet as soon as possible. It makes you safer in terms of making trades, apparently. We'll see how that works. Erecting Wonders. Well, we're going to have to cut this one and go on to another. And boy, do I dislike this rule book and the format of giving the information in this game. Okay, well, let's try to keep going here. Erecting Wonders. One of the big things that you want to build here are wonders. Okay? Well, each of the plans actually specifies what you have to pay to do it. And again, I don't want to look at those. But under partial construction, it says during the build phase, pay 2 gold commodities. So you're getting some idea of what you have to do. When you trade at Athens, you get your first Great Wonder plan for free, and thereafter you can get a second one for just 1 gold commodity. These are drawn randomly from the top of the deck. No island ever gets a third one. Now, if you get the wonder, if you get the wonder plan, you also get the wonders construction card. And these cards kept beneath the Great Wonder until the cost listed on the plans is played. Once the plan's been played, then I don't know what you do. But then sometimes you pay in other phases than the build phase. And I don't know what this means because I haven't looked at the Great Wonder cards. But it doesn't make a lot of sense the way it's worded. And that's fine. We'll see as we go, I think. Players are then permitted to immediately play the cost on the partial construction side if they choose, or wait until a later turn to do so. Once they pay the partial cost, then they get the completed Great Wonder, which apparently gives some advantage. Once per year during the island trade phase, you may sacrifice 2 rare commodities to discard 1 event in play. Sounds like a cool option. Again, you don't have a lot of control over what your Great Wonder is. In fact, you have none. You get 2 of them and you want to build them both. There may be some reason to say, I don't like this one, I'll draw for another one. But, alright. Let's see. Oh, some Great Wonders allow the players to pay other players to play the Wonder's owner to activate the special ability themselves, and you can't prevent someone from doing that. Okay, so far it sounds like kind of a complicated resource and building, production and building type game. But we're going to start getting into where it kind of drifts away from that. First of all, there's the trading aspect. That kind of opens things up. Not just the trading externally where you work by these deals, but also the fact that you can work with other people. For a pure resource management and building game, I'm not used to seeing the ability to make these deals in it. Especially the free deals among players. I like that aspect right away. Discard phase. You have to choose one of 2 options to discard your excess commodities. This is just commodities, not your Aegis cards, philosophies, blah, 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 anything else. You can discard all but 3 commodity cards, which you keep face down. They can be whatever you like. Or you can reveal all your commodity cards and discard all duplicate copies. In other words, you can keep 1 of each commodity card, but you must reveal all your cards to do so. 2 ways you can hold your hand. And obviously it's going to depend on what you're holding and how much you want other people to see what you're holding. I can't imagine people seeing being that big a deal. Not sure how much the trades are open. I would guess they can't be open, because if they were open, then people could just remember everything. I don't know. But, you equally have to worry about cheating then in a game of this nature, I think, or mistakes or whatever. So I don't know how they can be not open. I don't know. We'll see. This just doesn't strike me as the kind of game where you'd be not openly exchanging things. Okay. Okay, the final phase here is the Archon Step, and this is the part that's kind of cute. Now remember, the Archon, with events and some other aspects like who goes first where, has a limited amount of control over the game. But you choose the Archon. Each player has an Archon card. You give this to someone else. And whoever has the most of those, you have to give it to someone else. You can't hold on to it. You can't deny it. You have to choose someone else that you'd support for Archon. Whoever gets the most of those Archon cards at this point becomes the new Archon. If there's a tie, they're drawn at random amongst the players. And this is what wouldn't work well in 2, right? It would just be a random action. But as it stands, what things are going to make you choose who's going to be an Archon? Well, because the Archon can be influenced and bribed essentially to do certain things, like, hey, if you choose that event first, I'll give you an ore. That's allowable. You can also cut deals with them. So to some extent, there's an opportunity for a lot of advantages to accrue to the Archon. So maybe the worst player is going, the person in the worst position is going to be an attractive Archon. But the game makes it very clear that if you're cutting deals and then breaking them, if you're speaking, out of 2 different sides of your mouth, it's very likely, and I agree completely from my experience in games like this, it's very likely that people are just going to not select you. They won't trust you. They'd rather pick someone in the middle of the pack than the guy who's trailing, if the guy who's trailing is screwing everyone over at every chance he gets. So basically, you don't want to make enemies, because if you make enemies, you'll probably never get the Archon, and you'll probably not get the trades that you want as easily. You might end up becoming a pariah at the table. Okay, at the end of the year, after the last season of the first year, four event cards have come. Well, those event cards are removed from play, and then year 2 is set up, and you play those. And then the harbor status cards are discarded and a new one is put in each area. There's going to be one for each year. And if people have peeked at a harbor status card, you're allowed to look at them without turning them up if you don't want to trade there. And why would you be there? Well, you might not be able to fulfill the requirements. Those harbor status cards and any other face down ones remain face down. It's only if they're revealed that they go away, which is important, because if something was hard for you to cope with and you didn't, it's still going to be there hard to cope with the next year. You're not going to get lucky and have it go away. So at the end of any season, if any one island completes all of its structures, 6 villages, 2 workshops, 6 Acropolis, and 2 Great Wonders. Let's see what we're looking at. All 6 villages, including your 2 starting. All 6 of your Acropolis items. 2 workshops. 2 Great Wonders. Then the game ends. If the game goes through all 3 years, and it only lasts 3 years of cards, without anybody winning, the game still ends. And here's what's interesting. You have to look, you finish the entire season before determining who the winner is. You don't necessarily win the game if you finish your structures, although, to tell you the truth, building your structures, if you look at the victory conditions, that is how you win. So it's going to be pretty impossible to finish your structures and no one else does and you don't win. Let's look at how it goes. So if someone declares a win and ends the game, we don't worry about the first 5, right? Those are requirements. You cannot win unless you have all of these down. They're all your buildings. Anyone who has all their buildings, well then we start going to the tiebreakers. Most philosophies, most fleets, most Aegis cards. One at a time. And as soon as the tie is broken, we have a winner. Now if it goes to the end of the game, we worry about the first 5. And this is the order the buildings are in importance. Completing Great Wonders. Partially constructed Great Wonders. Most plans for Great Wonders. If you haven't bought your 2 plans, you're out of it, even if someone else has nothing, basically, other than that. Most Acropolis structures. Most workshops. Villages don't count. All the rest of these are down there, though. And, yeah, let's see. Right. So the one way of winning by ending the game and saying I've built everything, the only people eligible are those who have built everything. There's a couple of variants, neither of which I want to talk about too much. One's the Delian League. It opens up Athens for the first year just to make it easier to get your Great Wonders. And then there's a shorter version that gives you more starting stuff. It's like dealing out the property in Monopoly. Alright, well, I know I haven't been able to tell you a lot about the game. After playing it, I think I'll be able to give a little bit more information about it, but I want to be surprised. That's how I like playing a game, and I'm sorry if I'm not giving you more at this point, but I've given you a structure of the rules. We'll see how it goes.